Hello, welcome to There Will Always Be Another Book. Today I'm super excited to be talking about yet another book in the string of five-star reads that I've been reading, Moby Dick by Herman Melville. So, like I said, this book is a five-star read. I'll talk about the story behind my wanting to read this book in a second, but I will just say, first impressions, it is a absolutely fun, amazing ride. It is sort of the perfect book for me as well, and I'll get to that as well. But yeah, if you haven't read it, I don't know if I can recommend it, first impressions, because this book, it is for a certain sort of person, and I'm going to get into that. But yeah, needless to say, I was that sort of person, and so I thoroughly enjoyed this book. So, it's a classic book. It's been out for a long time. I don't need to go over it. I don't need to talk about any plot structure or anything. I will give a spoiler warning that I am going to talk about certain parts of the book that I really love that happen to be near the end. So, just a forewarning for that, for anyone who wants to read it. What I will start with, however, is whether you're the sort of person to read this book. Because I don't think this book is for everybody. I think the book, Okay, so while I was reading this book, all of the things that I was reading, I just had this overall overbearing feeling where I was like, I cannot imagine a book that is more boring for kids but more fun for adults. And that was sort of the impression that I had while I was reading the book. And, once I got to the end of the book, I thought about that a bit more. And I think that that's not entirely true. And I shouldn't discredit younger readers or discount younger readers. But really, the truth of this book, or the truth that I felt from this book, is that it's a book you need to consent to reading. And I can't imagine a book that would be more boring to have to read. The reason why you need to consent to reading it is because this guy loves talking about whales. And he loves talking about hunting whales. He loves talking about killing whales. He loves talking about the anatomy and bone and skin structure of whales. And if you're not ready for it, you can just be reading, enjoying the story, and then all of a sudden, bam, 15 pages talking about, like, just cataloging all of the whales that he's discovered and the kind of physical and personality traits of all of the whales. But to kind of give the book the credit that it's due, I'll describe a situation for you, and if this sounds appealing, if this sounds like your sort of thing, then you might well also love this book. Imagine you're going to a bar, you're waiting to, like, some friends are playing music, or somebody's playing and you want to go and check it out. And you're just sitting at the bar, you're having a drink, and talking to the person next to you. It's a random person. You're like, hey man, what's up? They're like, hey, whatever. You start to do all of the random boring bullshit, like surface level conversations. How was your day? What's your job? They talk about a job that they hate, and you talk about a job that you hate, and it's like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden, you get onto the topic, or you ask them about what their hobbies are, and you see them, like, they slowly put down a beer, they turn to you, their eyes open, and they're like, I'm really into D&D. Or they're like, I'm really into collecting, like, antique stamps or something. And I'm not interested in D&D. I'm not interested in antique stamps or anything like that. But I want to talk to somebody who is really interested in that. Like, I'm more interested in those topics than I am about talking about boring, everyday surface level stuff. So I'm just like, well, tell me more. Tell me about a D&D campaign that you're doing. And then imagine he just, on the spot, rips out a freaking, like, 20, 40, 50 page document, and he just goes on and on and on for like 2-3 hours, and you're just taken on this incredible journey where you're just like, I don't know anything about D&D. I don't even know if I like D&D at the end of this, but I am just so in love with how much you love this that I am all for it. And it's made this conversation so much better and so much more interesting. if you're that sort of person, then this is 110% the book for you. Because, like, yeah, I can't stress how much Melville just freaking loves talking about whales. It's so funny. And there's other interesting things, though. So it's not just like a well-expounded textbook. So there is a main story, and I will get to that. But that's the thing. That's the only thing. Like, is that you have to be that sort of person, and you have to have that sort of temperament if you want to read a book. And that's why I think the book can be so boring and so crucially, like, just uninteresting if you don't consent to reading it. If you don't come at the book and say, like, okay, I'm open, you do what you got to do, I'm here for it. Other than that, the only thing I'll add that will maybe make the book easier to read is this is a chapter book, and the chapters are very long. I think that 15-page chapter cetology, I don't remember, the study of whales and porpoises as well, I think. That's 15 pages, and that's the longest chapter. Like, there are some chapters in this book that are really just 1-2 pages long. And so it's quite easy to read. If you want to tell yourself to just read 1-2 chapters a day, you'll easily get through. There's one full chapter. So yeah. Other than that, I think I've maybe gotten to the point where where now I want to start talking about actual things in the book. Although before I do that, I'll leave you people who want to leave to avoid spoilers with one slight rant about spoilers with old books or with old media. I think that we completely miss the point when it comes to spoiling old media, because it's like, oh, these things are so old, you've had so much time to, like, get around and read it. But I think that's against the point, because one, this book was written in 1851, and 1851, I'm pretty sure, I'll correct it otherwise. But I'm not 171 years old, so it's not like I've had those years just sitting there waiting for me to read it. And also, you might not have even heard about Moby Dick, other than you might not have even thought it was a book that you could want to read. And also, it's a big book, so you might not even have been, like, hyped up to actually read it. So I think the whole debate about, like, oh, this is an old piece of art, you should have already read it, and so I can just spoil it without giving any warnings. I think that's a little bit, whatever. But anyway, if that sounds interesting, I'll leave you guys and gals go read the book and tell me what you think. For people who have read the book or don't care about spoilers, I'm going to first talk about the narrator, Ishmael, and because after having read quite a bit of Nabokov, I'm a big fan of any narrator shenanigans. I really love when there's stuff not quite normal. And Moby Dick started out with a very, I think, normal narrator, like a narrator main character, call me Ishmael, blah, 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 blah. And then there's the whole scenes in the beginning with him, going to the town, going to the Spouter Inn, where he meets Keg, I think is how the name's pronounced. And oh man, trust me, I'm going to get to that, because that was another just highlight of the book. But some things are a bit weird with Ishmael, like he's very much sort of just floating around, but you really starkly notice it as soon as they board the ship and they go away with Ahab. Pretty much at that point, I'm like convinced Ishmael stops being a real person. Like he just starts to become a floating kind of sentient orb that's just moving around the ship, seeing things and writing about it. Because aside from very, very minimal, like less than a handful of interactions, I don't think Ishmael does anything on the ship. No one ever talks to him while he's on the ship. And And that's fine, because after the ship starts, it becomes Ahab's story. It's not about Ishmael. But I thought it was very interesting that Ishmael is very like present and a very real person. But then there are some other shenanigans. So two things in particular. One, the very first line, "Call me Ishmael." Ishmael being like a kind of religious prophet name, but also "Call me Ishmael," which is not like "My name is Ishmael" or "I am Ishmael." It's like "Call me Ishmael," so it's probably not his real name. So there's some mystery involved. But then also there's a section where before they get on the boat, Ishmael is negotiating his lay, and the lay is, if I remember correctly, pretty much when a crew member signs up or signed it up to these whaling boats, they would say like, "Oh yeah, based on your skills, you get the 150th lay, or you get the 400th lay, or you get the 280th lay." And what that is pretty much, after we make it back, we sell everything, you get 1/100th or 1/400th or 1/280th of the profits. And Ishmael gets offered the 777th lay, which was just like big kind of religious, spiritual symbolism just floating in your face. And I thought that was quite kind of funny. Maybe I missed it, but there wasn't much else in regard that kind of obvious or explicit. But once you get on the boat, you start to read chapters that are from Ahab's perspective that Ishmael could not possibly know. And also there's, I just remembered the other chapter where I think it's Stubb. This is quite near the end of the book. So again, if you've been stubborn, spoiler alerts, when Stubb like grabs a musket and is like holding it to the door of Ahab, and Ahab is like sleeping. He's like talking in his sleep, and it's like a thunderstorm going on. And I was thinking about the scene from Shawshank Redemption where, you know, he's like kind of trying to, another spoiler alert, sorry, where he's trying to escape the prison, and he's timing the hits with the rock with the thunder, and I was like, oh man, is this something like what Stubb is trying to do? Is he gonna try and, you know, Stubb is just like holding the gun to the door and thinking about his kind of warped, twisted relationship with Ahab, and thinking about his wife and son that are waiting for him back at home. And oh man, what a great scene. And like that's another thing that's like, how did Ishmael know this at all to write about it? So there's some shenaniganery that's happening, and I really loved it. Coming on back, because I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Ishmael and Kikeg. Honestly, these guys, one of the things that helped my initial impression of the book was just the relationship of these two guys, and the chapters where, you know, Ishmael is trying to, like, you know, navigate sleeping together in the same bed as him, and he wakes up with like Kikeg's arm over his body, and there's like, he's just talking about like how it's actually quite comfortable, and they become bosom friends. And a lot of, like, you know, it's not explicit based on today's standards, but for the time, like some really quite explicit homoerotic activity, and I was all for it. And I have to just, I'm skipping through to a chapter that I think if anyone has read the book, you'll already see this coming, but this was just another amazing, hilarious moment. It's from a chapter called A Squeeze of the Hand, and I think after Stubb had like captured a whale, Ishmael is talking about the process of extracting the oil or the sperm from the whale, and I just need to read this entire paragraph because you will hopefully love it as much as I did. Squeeze, 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 all the morning long. I squeezed that sperm till I myself almost melted into it. I squeezed that sperm till a strange sort of insanity came over me, and I found myself unwittingly squeezing my co-laborers' hands in it, mistaking their hands for the gentle globules. Such an abounding, affectionate, friendly, loving feeling did this avocation beget, that at last I was continually squeezing their hands, and looking up into their eyes sentimentally, as much to say, "Oh, my dear fellow beings, why should we longer cherish any social acerbities, or know the slightest ill humor or envy? Come, let us squeeze hands all round. Nay, let us all squeeze ourselves into each other. Let us squeeze ourselves universally into the very milk and sperm of kindness." And aside from just being a lovely sentiment, I am gobsmacked that a book this old and with these explicit male-on-male intimacy scenes became like such a classic. And also, in light of a lot of recent bullshittery with books being censored, I'm surprised that this book has never been a target, which is kind of funny because it means the people who are censoring these books have probably never even read Moby Dick. So, jokes on them. But just I became like a fangirl, just shipping, pardon the pun. I wonder if that's where it came from. Anyway, just shipping Kikeg and Ishmael. I wish they just sailed off into back to Fiji or wherever Kikeg came from, and they just became lovers. I would read that book. I would read Moby Dick 2, the spin-off where massive spoiler alert. I had heard so much about Moby Dick, I would never have guessed that everyone except Ishmael dies in the end. So I was going to say like Moby Dick 2, but Moby Dick spin-off, where Stubb actually convinces Ahab to kind of give up and they just go home and they chill out. Man, I would read that book as well. Yeah, but I don't know how much more I can say about this book. I hope my glowing review has been enough to convince you to give this book a chance. It is a big book, and also maybe closing thoughts just on the. Don't know if this is sacrilegious, and I don't know if I would even actually do this, but it is an option. It's nice to have read the book because now I know what parts I can sort of skip when I reread because I might remember them, or I could just be like, yeah, it's not a main story chapter, let's just move on. And they're not randomly placed. It's not like you'll just suddenly have a jump to a just have a random non sequitur. But yeah, there are some parts that you can help, and on subsequent rereads you can skip through it if you wanted to. But yeah, that's I think all I'm going to say about Moby Dick. This book blew me out of the water. I can't describe how much fun it was. It might not have been the best book I've read this year because I've read some pretty good books this year, but it's undoubtedly the most fun I've had with a book for a long time. So please give Moby Dick a chance if you haven't already. Remember to keep on reading because there will always be another book, and I'll see everybody in the next video.